today. We're moving on in Jeremiah, and the next section is one of the happiest sections, and also one of the most unhappy sections altogether. Beautifully written, it's beautiful prose, it's prophetic, it's immutable, it's trustworthy, it's historical, it's accurate, and it's penetrating to the heart. And so we'll go through this, and we'll bring it up to date in where we are in our nation, in our country, in our personal lives, and in particular, what the cost is. You know, we've seen up through the first 40 years of Jeremiah's ministry what has been happening to these people in terms of their earthly consequences. But there's a greater consequence here that we're about to get to. And when we were in the service last week with Pastor Jeff, he was talking to us about sin and how it's so appealing. It is so appealing. And how for a season it can draw you in and just suck you in. But you never really know what the cost is going to be. You really don't know what the cost is. The cost isn't explained to you. And it's always more than you're willing to pay. So we're going to look at this chapter, and when we left our hero off last week, he's still in prison. Jeremiah's still in prison, but you know his attitude, he's not lamenting, and he's told us that the siege walls have already been built. They've already been built around Jerusalem, and that's very, very significant. That doesn't mean a lot to us, because we've never been in a city that's been surrounded by siege walls. But the city of Lachish, which is a very, very good fortified city, is about to fall. And Lachish is the bellwether for Judah. Lachish is one of the great defenses of Judah. And Nebuchadnezzar, when he came in, he's got 50,000 men with him. He's got 50,000 men. The Egyptians have come up from the south with the alliance that Judah had with the Egyptians. And true enough, they did come. But Nebuchadnezzar sent a contingent down and soundly defeated them in the Sinai. So Egypt has turned back. Judah is by themselves. Lachish is about to fall. And when Jeremiah is talking about the buttresses that are being raised up against the city and the siege walls, the technology was not new to the Babylonians. The Babylonians took this from the Assyrians because the Assyrians conquered Lachish the very same way. Now remember, the Assyrians conquered Lachish, and that's when Hezekiah, what happened to Hezekiah? When Lachish fell, what did he do? He got scared. He got scared, and so he stripped the temple of the gold and stripped the temple of the silver and gave it to the Assyrians as a peace offering. Hey, look, if they can take Lachish, they can take us. So he stripped it all, and then he goes to God in prayer, and the Lord said, look, I have told you, and the prophet Isaiah has told you, you're not going to be fallen. You are not. I'm going to protect Jerusalem. So why did you do that? Well, lack of faith. And so what happens when the Assyrians and Sennacherib comes to Jerusalem? Well, the Lord himself, the angel, comes and slays his army of 185,000. So 50,000 are coming up, and when this siege wall is built, the siege wall, here's the fortress, and the siege wall is an earthen rampart. It's an earthen rampart that's built up to the wall, and it's covered in stone. The top is covered with stone to give it a hard surface. And the siege engines that the Babylonians used, it was a clone of the Assyrian siege engine. It was just like that. It was a clone. And it had wheels on it. And they would roll this up the ramp until they got to the bottom of the ramp. Then they would have men that would drive wooden posts onto either side of the siege wall. A rope would be laid around the wooden post, and the men would be back here, and they would pull up the siege engine on the rope. So they would be in the back, out of the way of the immediate arrows and out of the way of any gravity-fed missile, and they would be pulling the siege engine up, and the siege engine goes up the ramp. At the very front of the siege engine is a log. It's a big log, and at its point is metal or iron. And it is held in place by several ropes. And you have two men in the back of the siege engine. They're protected under a a tin canopy. Because one of the tricks that the Israelis did to the Assyrian siege machines is they would throw fire and hot tar on top of it. So Nebuchadnezzar had his siege engines covered with a tin or a metal, so they were impervious to the fire. And the two men that were inside of the siege engine, because it was carried by the ropes, they would just rock it back and forth. Just rock. It was a modern day battering ram. And I know in the movies you kind of see a bunch of men charging up there and the Vikings knocking down walls and stuff. But this was extremely effective because it was protected, and because the buildings and the walls were made of stone, they would be able to aim the point of the siege harpoon into the joints, into the mortar. And so they would just sit there and knock the mortar, and then what happens? Well, gravity causes the stone to come. And so it was extremely effective. And so that's why Jeremiah is saying, okay, you know what? It's too late. It's too late. And this was the same thing that they used at Achish. So when Achish fell under this kind of technology, well, Jeremiah knew once he sees them building the siege walls, okay, we're next. Yep, we are next. Inside of the fortress are 10,000 Jews. There are 10,000 Jewish soldiers. And Nebuchadnezzar's got 50,000 men on the outside. So you can see just the logistics are very, very difficult. And that's why Jeremiah was lamenting here at the very, very end. He said, flee, go on, give yourself up. You will not survive this. You will not survive. And it gets so ugly because they've been dealing with the drought, with the famine, and with the pestilence. And pretty soon they're going to start boiling their own kids to eat them because of hunger. Right? Very, very, very serious consequences to their sin. But in the midst of all this, Jeremiah's in prison. And when we look back and think about it, we know poor Jeremiah, he's in prison. But you know what? That's probably one of the most safest places he could be. He's in prison. He's not subject to any missiles. He's down in the prison, and he's in prison right now, and it's going to get a little worse. But right now, he's safe, and so he's writing this letter from the dungeon of the palace. Okay, he's writing this letter, and it's this letter of hope, this letter of amazing hope. So we left off last week in Jeremiah 32. We're going to pick it up in verse 37. Jeremiah 32, 37. Behold, I will gather them out of all countries, whither I have driven them in mine anger, in my fury and great wrath, and I will bring them again unto this place, and I will cause them to dwell in safety. So the Lord is saying, even though they're going to be dispersed, and this prophetic pre-fulfillment we see in the return after 70 years, but we also see this in 1948 when they return, and we see it clearly during the millennial reign. In 38. And they shall be my people, and I will be their God. Verse 39. And I will give them one heart. Okay, one heart. What was the problem at the very beginning? This whole letter by Jeremiah, it's a love story. It's a love story. The Lord is speaking from his heart. Why have you hardened your heart against me? Have I ever been untrue to you? Have I ever been unfaithful? Have any of my promises never been unfulfilled? No, it's not the case at all. They had heart trouble. You know, we have a lot of heart trouble today, don't we? Absolutely. You know, I mean, just in that double entendre sense, we have a lot of heart trouble. The problem was their heart. Their heart was wrong. And then what did he say? Look, I'm going to give you one heart and what? Look at this prophecy for the future. One way. One way. There has always just been one way to God. There's always been one way. Always. Back in the very beginning, then the Lord was telling, even with Adam and Eve, do all these things. You have the run of the garden, except this one thing. There's one thing that you cannot do. There's only one way to satisfy the sacrificial rites in the temple. There was only one way to be saved. There's only one way to salvation. And this is under great attack today. It really is, because the argument is, well, you bigot. How can you possibly say there's one way? Well, the answer is, there are many ways to Jesus, but Jesus is still the one way. And when you come to Jesus, and that's how I answer that argument. You mean you can't go, the Hindus and the Buddhists and the whatever else? Well, no. And the argument is this, there's this wheel. There's this wheel in all the different religions of the world. They have a certain amount of enlightenment. They're all going to the center, and the center is God. So there are many ways to the Lord. No, that's not what the Scripture says at all. And we know this can't be true. This can't be true on its face because they all contradict each other. They all contradict each other. And every single one is simply a lowering of the bar to meet some standards set by man so that man can try to reach God. Christianity is the only one where God's coming to man and says, you can't do it, let me help you. Now, there are many ways to Jesus. It can be through a sermon, it can be through a tragedy, it can be through the witness of a friend, or through the Bible, or in a service. There are lots of ways to Jesus. So there's not just one way. There are many ways to Jesus, but there's only one way. And that's what Jeremiah is saying. You'll have one heart, and there's just one way. There's just one way. In fact, the early Christians call themselves the way. The way. All right. Why? That they may fear me forever, for the good of them and of their children after them. And I will make an everlasting covenant with them, and I will not turn away from them to do them good, but I will put my fear in their hearts, that they shall not depart from me. I will rejoice over them to do them good. I will plant them where? In this land. Assuredly with my whole heart and with my whole soul. For thus saith the Lord, like as I brought all this great evil upon this people, so will I bring them all the good that I have promised. So in the midst of this calamity, he is still saying, I have not given up on you. This disaster in Jerusalem, it is going to be apparent to everybody, to all the world, but it is not final. I am not through with you. I am not through with you. This is his corrective discipline, his redirection of his people back to the ways of God. And then this is very interesting in 43. And fields shall be bought in this land, whereof ye say it is desolate without man or beast, it's given it to Chaldeans. Men shall buy fields for money, and subscribe evidences, and seal them, and take witnesses in the land of Benjamin. Okay, let's go. And on Benjamin, very south, the places around Jerusalem, okay, all that includes East Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, South Jerusalem, North, all around Jerusalem. The cities of Judah, the entire south. Cities of the mountains, north. Cities of the valleys, Gaza. And the cities of the south, the Negev. And I will cause their captivity return, saith the Lord. He has given this to them as an inheritance. But in spite of that fact, he is directing them and prophesying here that they are going to purchase this land in fee simple. Who was the first person to purchase land in fee simple? David. Right? After David had conquered Jerusalem, and he was setting up Jerusalem as the capital, they were moving the capital from Shiloh to Jerusalem, and he had taken the census. And what happened after he took the census? The Lord brought judgment on the land. And David took the census because he wanted to glory in himself. Well, look at my great army. Look at all the numbers that I have and all these horses and chariots. I'm going to number them. I'm going to number the people. And I'll see what a great country we have. The Lord said, your strength is not in your numbers. Your strength is in me. And the Lord brought judgment. And so as the angel was coming, what did David say? Look, let me sacrifice unto God. And the Temple Mount area, that Temple Mount, he purchased that. And that's where the wheat was being sifted up there, because if the air would blow by, the air would blow and you could sift the wheat from the chaff. And he purchased that from around the Jebusite. He bought that land. David bought it. And what did Jeremiah do, even though he's in jail? He buys land. The entire Zionist movement, which began well before the Balfour Declaration was declared, it did what? Jews from all around the world, and they would have these blue and white coin boxes. I've never seen them, but they would have them all over different places where Jews would congregate in all their synagogues, and in these blue and white boxes, they put their coins, they put their offerings, and slowly, they were buying up all of Israel. They were just buying it up. They were buying it up, and you know what? They bought it cheap because it was swampland. It was desert. Part of the reason it was a desert because throughout history, every nation that conquered Israel did the best they could to destroy the place, to raze it from the trees, to consume all the resources. And the desert is blooming now, and everybody wants it back. Oh, well, this is a nice place after all. We want it back, but when when they first started buying the land, it was desert and swampland, absolute desert and swampland. And so they were buying it up, and that's what Jeremiah is saying here. There's going to be a time you're going to buy this land, and you're going to own this land, knowing what? Because there's going to be some type of controversy about who really should be living there. But the scripture is very clear. All of this belongs to you. It all belongs. Balfour Declaration or not, United Nations or not, this belongs to you, and I'm going to see that you get it. Okay. Well, they are there, aren't they? Yeah, they're there. Okay, 33. So the glorious return. Moreover, the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the second time, while he was yet shut up in the court of the prison, saying, Thus saith the Lord, the maker thereof, the Lord that formed it and established it, the Lord is his name. Call unto me, and I will answer thee, and show thee great and mighty things which thou knowest not. For thus saith the Lord God of Israel concerning the houses of the city, and concerning the houses of the kings of Judah, which are thrown down by the mounts, and siege, and the sword. They come to fight with the Chaldeans, but it is to fill them with the dead bodies of men who I am slain in mine anger and in my fury for all the wickedness I hid my face from the city. Behold, I will bring it health and cure, and I will cure them, heal them, and reveal unto them the abundance of peace and truth. Even though the inevitability of the disaster that the Chaldeans are going to bring, I will bring healing. I'll still bring healing. Verse 7, And I will cause the captivity of Judah and the captivity of Israel to return, and will build them as the first. So he's saying, not only am I going to bring you back, I'm going to bring Israel back. Remember, at this time we have a divided kingdom. We have Judah in the south and Israel in the north. I'm bringing everybody back. To do what? I'll cleanse them from all their iniquity, whereby they have sinned against me. I'll pardon their iniquities, whereby they've sinned, and whereby they've transgressed against me. And it shall be to me a name of joy, a praise, and an honor before all the nations of the earth, which shall hear all the good that I do unto them. And they shall fear and tremble for all the goodness and for all the prosperity that I procure unto it. Here is the plan of God. The plan of God for setting aside Israel, the land, and his people was to have a people who could demonstrate the glory of God and the goodness of God. That was their purpose. That was their intention. The reason they were redirected out of the land, because they weren't doing it. And he did that to bring discipline. He did that to bring redirection. But this is what they were supposed to do. A name of joy, praise, honor before all the nations of the earth, which shall hear all the good that I do unto them. And they shall fear and tremble for the goodness and for the prosperity that I procure unto it. If we look at on the back of your handout, I have the gross domestic product per capita of Israel compared to everybody else on the continent. Okay, everybody else on the continent. Now, all of these lands have great amounts, especially perhaps Lebanon, great amounts of oil. Lots and lots and lots of oil reserves. And so you have Qatar up at the top, United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait. Those are the top three. And look where Israel is. What oil does Israel have? And what natural resources do they have out of that desert wasteland that somehow they're able to develop that type of GMP? And they have all these laureates and all these Nobel Prize winners and these scientific discoveries and things we take for granted every day in medicine and the sciences. Those are all Israeli inventions. They're all Israeli inventions. We've handed out lists before of all the patents that they hold and the engineering designs they hold, and computer designs and technologies. The cell phone that you have right now is an Israeli invention. The cell phone, that's theirs. I don't know if that's good or not, but we all have one now. But look where their GNP is. And they're just a tiny, tiny postage stamp of a country surrounded by enemies. Missiles falling in the country every single day. Boycotted by all these lands that surround them, don't buy Israeli products. But look where they are. That's providence. It's impossible. It's impossible. That is providence. And what did God promise them? I'm going to show the world. The whole world is going to see it. Well, you know what? You can dial this up on the internet today. The whole world can't see it. The whole world can see it. No. At the time, it must have been, well, how can the whole world see that? Well, yeah, they can. Yeah, they can. This is the country collectively, but it speaks to us individually. What is my life supposed to reflect? What is my life supposed to reflect? Huh? The name of the Lord. To bring what? To bring what? I can't bring joy to all the world, but in my sphere of influence, what is that? Bring joy, praise, honor to everyone that I know, honor to the Lord. They're going to hear all the good. And because of that, they're going to fear, because of the goodness that he shows, and the prosperity, the blessings that he brings. Huh? And he's doing that. Remember, Jeremiah's writing this from where? From prison. From prison. And in prison, he's glorifying the Lord by doing what? Being obedient and faithful. And because of his faithfulness, even though he was in prison, what are we seeing here? We're seeing all this prophetic revelation. And we're getting joy. We're getting praise to the nations for the glory of God. We all have a reason. We all have a call, and we all have a purpose. When we're not in it, we're out of the land. We're not called to anything else. Oh, we're called to his purposes. Okay, that's fine. Verse 10. Thus saith the Lord, again, there shall be heard in this place which ye say be desolate, without man, without beast, even in the cities of Judah, in the streets of Jerusalem that are desolate, without man, without inhabitant, without beast. Here's what's going to happen in the future. The voice of joy, the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom, the voice of the bride, the voice of them that shall say, praise the Lord of hosts, for the Lord is good, his mercy endureth forever. And of them that shall bring the sacrifice of praise into the house of the Lord, for I will cause to return the captivity of the land, as at the first, said the Lord. What is interesting about this passage is the Jewish community takes this very, very literally. The 9th of Ab is the day that ultimately Jerusalem falls. It was an 18-month siege. You know, they fought valiantly. They really, really fought valiantly. And of course, the walls were very good. The improvements that Hezekiah had made, not just to the walls, but to the water supply, proved to allow them to continue for a great time. When the Assyrians came, one of the great marvels of technology, and I think some of y'all have walked through that, is Hezekiah's tunnel. He built a tunnel. He built a tunnel from the top Mount of Jerusalem down to the Gihon Springs, and that tunnel was protected, and so there was water that was able to come up into the city because of the tunnel that he dug. So they still had water even though they were without food, so it allowed them to continue a little bit longer than otherwise. But on the 9th of Ab, which would be August, more or less August in our calendar, that's when most of the Jewish people get married. Because even though Jerusalem fell at the time of celebration, well, he's brought us back, and we're still here, and we're still alive, and we still have our language, and we still have our calling, and we still have our destiny. Let's continue. Let's get married! And so August is the time of marriage celebration. Just, I guess, kind of like June brides, well, August brides, because of this voice of mirth and gladness that's going to come. Now, we have this bridegroom reference. This is going to be fun as we go on. Here, verse 12. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, again in this place, which is desolate, without man, without beast, and in all the cities thereof shall be a habitation of shepherds, causing their flocks to lie down. Now, if the place is laid waste, and you've had all this drought and famine, there were, even in Texas, one of the reasons we have barbed wire, the invention of barbed wire, what was one of the main factors in inventing barbed wire? Yeah, keep the sheep out. What do sheep do? Eat everything. They eat down to the base of the grass. They eat it all. And you can't have sheep and cattle on the same land. You can't, because the sheep, they consume too much. They eat it down to the ground, and so you have those sheep range wars. And then you have barbed wire and these other inventions to keep them separate. Well, if you've been through this type of drought, you just can't imagine having enough foliage to support sheep. They say, no, not just that. Look what's cool here. There'll be a habitation of shepherds, causing their flocks to lie down. We open up in Luke with these promises being fulfilled, and what do we see? And there were shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flocks by night. Isn't that how the New Testament opens, with that glory? This redemption, this promise. And not only that, look what he promises. He doesn't promise flocks. What does he promise first? They're going to be shepherds, causing their flocks to do what? Lie down. If you're lying down, if your flocks are able to lie down, there's some peace, there's some stability. And Jesus shows up in Bethlehem. Bethlehem was the location where all of the sheep were raised for slaughter in the temple. It's no coincidence, it's no accident that he was born in Bethlehem. Bethlehem is where the sheep were raised. If you were in Bethlehem and you were a sheep, okay, you're going down for temple sacrifice. And Jesus, the Lamb of God, born in Bethlehem, the epicenter of where sheep were raised, to go to the slaughter to be our sacrifice. And he comes in the scene, he says, what? I am the good shepherd. All like sheep have gone astray. Look at how this is so well written. I wish I had written this. It's just so well. This is beautiful. All right, 13. Where? In the cities of the mountains, the cities of the vale, the cities of the south, the land of Benjamin, the places about Jerusalem, the cities of Judah, shall the flocks pass again, under the hands of him that telleth them, saith the Lord. All right. And we'll pick up next week. It just continues. It's the same passage, but we go through. Oh no, let's read just a little bit more. 14. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will perform that good thing which I have promised to the house of Israel and the house of Judah. In those days and in that time will I cause up the branch of righteousness to grow up unto David, and he shall execute judgment and righteousness in the land. He. All right? Let's go on. In those days shall Judah be saved, and Jerusalem shall dwell safely, and this is the name wherewith she shall be called. She shall be called. He's referring to Israel in the feminine. She shall be called the Lord our righteousness. You just had this picture of marriage and the bridegroom and joy and celebration and happiness. You have Jesus, the bridegroom, and who? The bride. The bride. So he's setting up this platform. And when Jesus comes and speaks to this people, it has the ring of truth in their heart. They go, wait a minute, I've seen this before. You're he. And what did he say? I am he. I'm he. I'm he. So in the Jewish mind, he says he's he, the Lord our righteousness. All right. Grapevine. We'll pick up next week. Just beautiful stuff. Okay.